Hey, folks, I don't usually have to make a disclaimer before my podcast, but this time I do. I don't think it's appropriate for little kids to be hearing this conversation that I'm about to have with author Ed Jones. We are going to talk about the most violent situation you can really imagine. But I don't want it to scare you away from it necessarily, because it's a discussion about pharmaceuticals and antidepressant drugs and other types of medications that are really plaguing our society. You probably know people in your family, yourself, or others who are taking SSRIs, which we'll talk about. And I think that this episode can help you be aware of some of the potential problems. And the particular case, the David Crespi case, will go into great detail about how these SSRIs had a massive impact on him and, of course, his victims and his family. So please share this episode with anyone that you know who's dealing with depression or is on antidepressants, because I think that more information is always helpful. So thanks for listening, but please make sure the little kids in the car or around the house are not listening to this. As a dad, it's just not the right episode for them to listen to. Thanks for listening. Take care.
How is it possible that a legally prescribed SSRI antidepressant could turn a superstar banker who was an exemplary father and husband into a killer?
I remember clearly when this happened.
Yeah.
David Crespi was a very well-respected, successful man.
Yeah. He was at home with Kim and the 5-year-old twin girls. Kim, who had a haircut appointment, she goes out at about 12:05. Right after she leaves, the little girls see David, on his computer, and the little girls go over to him and ask him if he wants to play hide and seek. And as they're going to their hiding place, he went over to the kitchen counter to the butcher block and got out 2 large knives. And so it soon came out that David, at the time that he committed this horrific act, he had just started Prozac 7 days before this. He was also on trazodone. He was also on Ambien. And I had on my mind, could one of those drugs have had something to do with this case?
1 in 5 Americans is on an antidepressant?
That's right.
What?
20% of Americans now on antidepressants.
What the hell is depression if it's not this? Because that's what we've all been told. Look,
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but the pharmaceutical company who's making billions off of this,
That's right.
with 20% of Americans, they're not going to volunteer the answer. Ed, I always have problems figuring out how to start a podcast, and this one takes the cake, man. How in the world do we go about talking about this subject? I mean, I guess you're a pro at this point.
Yeah.
So
a lot of different layers to it.
Yeah, for sure. But I thought, in order to just, because of the nature of these horrific murders, the slaughter of this innocence, the complex background and the complex ongoing story, I took the time to write a little tiny introductory remarks on my perception of your book, your work,
Right.
and the story that we're about to go through in great detail. So we're going to spend the next number of hours you unpacking it and explaining it and fixing anything that I say wrong. But I'd like to read this and then and as part of my introduction of you in this subject matter. So if you don't mind, for my readers, for my listeners, I'm going to just read for a second.
Perfect.
Which I usually don't do, but this is a sacred moment in a way because of the severity of this issue. So this is at the very least the 3 different stories, in my opinion. The first is a tale so tragic it nearly defies language. The unfathomable slaughter of twin 5-year-old girls by the hand of their own father. There was no warning, no motive, no history of violence, only silence and then horror. It is a story that has haunted the Catholic heart of Charlotte for nearly 2 decades, a wound that never fully closed. This is the first story, and we will let you tell us in painful and excruciating detail as much as you want to about that first story. Now, the second story, in my mind, is the story of a mother, a wife, who lost everything in a single unthinkable day. Her daughters taken by violence, her husband swallowed by a prison cell, and yet she remained, left to raise her surviving children in the shadow of an unimaginable loss. But here, in the ash and ruin, blooms something divine. Her faith, staggering, radiant, otherworldly, shines through all of this darkness, and her capacity to forgive, to love, to extend compassion where others would turn to stone is nothing short, in my opinion, of miraculous. The third story is one of quiet evil, the kind that wears a white coat and speaks in soothing tones. It is the story of a pharmaceutical empire built not on healing but on profit, an industry whose careless distribution of powerful antidepressants and other medications has unleashed a silent plague of violence and madness. Families shattered, innocents butchered, the temporarily insane, locked away, while the chemical triggers are dismissed without consequence. It is a tale not just of medicine gone awry, but of moral collapse of an industrial scale, on an industrial scale. These are the 3 stories I drew from your book, Ed. You may frame them differently, but your years of friendship with David Crespi, your deep personal knowledge of his family, and your painstaking effort to uncover, document, and share this tragedy moved me profoundly. And so with great admiration and a heavy heart, I welcome to this table the award-winning writer and contributor to the Charlotte Observer and many other accolades, Mr. Ed Jones. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to have this chance to talk with you. Really appreciate it.
That's how I see this. I see this as 3 stories. At least it could be more. I mean, he has all these other children, all these other people in the community, the friendships. But I see this as the story of a horrific murder. Yeah. I see it as a story of incredible mercy by his wife, who seems to be a saint. Yeah. And third, I see it as a story of the pharmaceutical empire. And so that's kind of how I summarize this whole thing after reading every page of this book.
Yeah. I tell folks that the spine of the book is Kim Crespi's contemporaneous journal entries, starting immediately after this horrific tragedy that we're going to talk about. And it's so she's the real life hero at the center of this. And it's kind of a detective story in a way. A couple of reviewers have mentioned that to me, that they see it as a kind of detective story. And, what do I mean by that? And it's kind of like readers are invited to join Kim and I as we go on a quest to find clues and answers to 3 questions. How is it possible that a legally prescribed SSRI antidepressant could turn a superstar banker who was an exemplary father and husband into a killer? Number 2, why didn't the pharmaceutical companies who were aware of the potentially lethal side effects of these medications do more to make those side effects known? And how have those companies been able to get away with burying negative and alarming test results revealed in hundreds of clinical trials for decades? So that's, I think that's a pretty good way to look at it as well. And so, yeah, we kind of follow. I've got the book organized in 3 parts, and I kind of borrowed from Dante's Divine Comedy here. First one is Inferno. The first part is Inferno. It's almost like we start off in hell, and Kim is Virgil, kind of leading us through. And then the second part is Purgatorio, and the third part is called Hoping Against Hope. So, but your summary works beautifully too.
I was just some personal context here. I remember clearly when this happened.
Yeah.
And I think anyone plugged in the Catholic world, I didn't go to St. Matthew's Catholic Church. St. Matthew's Catholic Church, for those of you who don't know, is the largest parish in the United States of America without exaggeration. It's like, really is the largest. And it's in South Charlotte. Charlotte is a banking empire. And there's a lot of money. And there's now a lot of Catholics because of all the transplants from, all over the country for the banking particularly.
That's right. And
so David Crespi was a very well-respected, successful man who I think had five children.
That's right. 2 by a previous marriage. Mm-hmm. His first wife was also named Kim, and she died of a brain tumor when she was like 29 years old.
It's very tragic, and actually, I did not know that until reading your book. I did not know. I don't think a lot of people know.
That's right. That's right.
So he had already undergone a real trauma in his life. So then I hear about this incident, and without naming names, somebody that worked for me a number of years ago got very close with the family and is now part of that family.
Right.
And I will say Bob Wertel, our mutual friend, who I think is a saint. I
agree.
I love you, Bob. I really do. He put us in contact here. But for the last, I don't know how many years, maybe you would know, 15 years, 18 years. I don't know how long Bob Wertel, how long ago he got involved with David after he was in prison.
It had to have been early. So probably at least 15, 18, 19 years, somewhere in there.
He has dedicated a lot of his life now to supporting Kim, the children, and befriending David Crespi. So he's he's visiting the imprisonment. He's practicing on a daily basis the one of the corporal works of mercy. So there's so many, like every tragedy, and we need to get into the story. But what I think, being in this community for all these years, Ed, whenever there's extreme tragedy, what's amazing is the beauty that ends up surrounding it. It's like the devil shows his nasty face, and God allows that to happen so that God can show his face.
Yes.
And that's what's happened here.
Yes.
And by the way, you were mentioning, this is unbelievable. Like Kim's journal entries are like inspired by God. I mean, they're unbelievable. Their ability to pierce the spiritual issue of what's going on. How was she able to write such beautiful spiritual insights in the midst of her children being slaughtered? I don't know how she did it, but she did it.
That's right. She said, and I captured this in the book, she said that the whole time she was growing up, she never felt like she was out of God's presence. She always felt the presence of God in her life. And so, she converted to Catholicism because David himself was a very, and still is a passionate Catholic. So, I mean, those journal entries are profoundly moving and I think divinely inspired. And I cried, reading some of those. She gave me a 400-page journal, and so I had to kind of winnow everything down. But what made me cry was her courage and her ability to light a candle instead of cursing the darkness, and always trying to find a way to use this story to help others. She immediately turns, or not immediately, it took her a little bit, but soon after the tragedy, she turns to, her heart goes out to other people who are suffering from mental illness, and she kind of starts wondering, how can we use this story to maybe save other people or comfort other people? And I guess those kind of qualities must be inborn, or
it's grace. It's grace, exactly. Which you have to be receptive to.
Exactly.
God just doesn't pour grace on someone who's rejecting it. So I hope that Kim or David, or whoever ends up listening to this, he truly believes of our best wishes for them and our prayers for them and their whole family, because it's sincere. It's not just rattling off pious words like I really do. After reading this book, they really have been a part of my prayers. All right, let's get into it, Ed.
Sure.
Because most people are probably saying, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Okay, so let me first tell folks about how I kind of first came to know David or know of him. And so it started in November 2005. Both my wife and I participated in Curcio weekends. And so I encountered David at the Curcio weekend for the men. My wife encountered Kim, and Kim and my wife, Ann, started grouping afterwards, and I didn't get a chance to group with David. So anyway, about a month after the Curcio, right around Christmas time, Ann said that Kim had told her that David was starting to experience depression, serious depression. And right away, my antenna went up, because by that time, I had punched my way through 3 bouts of clinical depression. This was before the advent of any of these antidepressants. So I found ways, including religion, to get through. And we can get into that maybe a little bit later. But anyway, so as you can imagine, anybody has suffered from depression and knows what agony it is on multiple levels has enormous empathy when they hear somebody like David Crespi is experiencing it. So I told my wife to tell Kim that I'd been through depression, and if David ever needed somebody to just sit there with him, talk, I'd be there yesterday. Mm-hmm. And so the word came back. Kim told my wife, Ann, that David had been through these episodes before, and that they felt like he was getting the best clinical care he'd ever gotten in his life. So, breathed a sigh of relief. So this is like, right around Christmas time. And then on January the 20th, 2006, 3-4 weeks later, we got a phone call from a dear friend named Teresa, who called my wife and said, Ann, have you got a minute? And my wife knew something heavy was going on. She was at work, and she stepped outside. Yeah, what's going on? And Teresa says, Dave. It's about Dave. Ann says, Dave Crespi? Yeah, Dave Crespi has done away with his twins. And I heard that, and it just kind of shattered me, And so anyway, as far as what happened, yeah, he was a senior vice president with Wachovia at the time, and so they put him on leave to help him, to say, try to heal from this, and he was at home on leave with depression on January the 20th. And he was at home with Kim and the 5-year-old twin girls. The other 3 children were at their other various schools. The twins were home because they had a bad cold. And so therefore they didn't think they should go to daycare. So anyway, what happened was, and if I get emotional, please forgive me. Right around noon, Kim, who had a haircut appointment, decided to, he's fine with the little girls. I'm going to go get my hair cut. And she goes out at about 12:05. And right after she leaves, the little girls see David, on his computer, and the little girls go over to him and ask him if he wants to play hide and seek. And he says, sure. And so they go to their hiding place. And as they're going to their hiding place, he went over to the kitchen counter to the butcher block and got out 2 large knives. Then he went and found the little girls in the pantry, dragged both of them over to the floor, and picked up one of the knives and started stabbing poor Samantha in the chest and the back multiple times. And while he was doing that, Sarah wrested herself free and ran upstairs. Now, so David kept stabbing Samantha until he thought she was dead. And then he went upstairs, found Tess hiding in his closet behind his clothes, and dragged her out onto their master bathroom, onto the tile floor, did the same thing to her, stabbed her with a different knife in the front and the back, never in the face. Then he just kind of drops his bloodstained clothes, washes up, puts on new clothes, and calls 911. And it's an eerie sequence. You can find it online, but I've got excerpts from it in the book. First thing he says, "I just killed my 2 daughters." In this kind of strange way. "You just what?" "I just killed my 2 daughters." Then a female 911 operator cuts in and almost immediately says, "Sir, are you on any medication?" Later he says, "Yes." "What kind of medications?" Antidepressants. She later says, we're kind of worried that you have taken too many medications, and that's what's going on. He says, "No, this is real." And then not long after that, the police showed up. Now, an important point to make is that 911 call was not released to the press nor to the general public until almost 3 months after David was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Somehow that was, because this woman, 911 operator, sensed what was going on. So anyway, and as far as so of course, in the aftermath of the tragedy, I was riveted by the reporting that the Charlotte Observer did. I followed it very closely. I'd written for the Observer and all that, and they did a terrific job. And so it soon came out that David, at the time that he committed this horrific act, he had just started Prozac 7 days before this, which is a very important thing to remember. He was also on trazodone. He was also on Ambien, and they had the day before the tragedy, his doctor had switched him from Ambien to Lunesta, and so I get into this in a chapter about the Superior Court hearing that I went to. I had heard about Ambien and the effect that can have on various folks, because I had read about a case in Washington, D.C. Patrick Kennedy, the son of Teddy Kennedy, was arrested because he had this kind of souped up Mustang or something like that, but in the middle of the night he just ran that thing into all sorts of barriers. Luckily, he didn't hurt anybody nor himself, but so he's arrested, and it turned out that he was on Ambien at the time, and so anyway, at the time I went to the Superior Court hearing, I knew about possible side effects of Ambien, and I had on my mind, could these drugs that I've read about, could one of those drugs have had something to do with this case? And but I thought that Prozac was, a happy pill, just a miracle drug, and all that sort of thing. So I'm probably going too long, but as I went into the Superior Court hearing, I talk about this in the book, I think. I went into that Superior Court hearing basically a law and order conservative kind of guy. I'd heard about this awful case that I include in the book about Andrea Yates, the mother of 5 children, who this is a horrible case.
Yes, it is.
She was suffering from postpartum depression, and while her husband was away, she was alone with the 5 children, and she went and drowned each one of them one by one in the bathtub where she had bathed them, for years. And so anyway, I thought, when I went into that Superior Court hearing, I thought, this woman should be waterboarded to death, But by the time that Superior Court hearing ended, I thought definitely David this was a miscarriage of justice, that he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. He was clearly in the midst of a psychotic break. And it just came to me, oh my God, I've been wrong about the Andrea Yates case. And then, I find out through my research later, she was on like 2 or 3 times the recommended dosage of Effexor, which is an antidepressant, and also on Remeron. So
let me interrupt here. About every 10 pages or so in your book, maybe less, maybe more, there is a shaded box where you give another story, another real life case.
That's right.
Of someone who has no criminal background.
That's right.
No prior tendency towards violence. They get on these particular types of drugs, and there's different versions, which we'll get into later.
Yes.
And they commit heinous crimes, very often followed by suicide.
That's right.
Many of them are the famous school shootings, everything from Columbine and forward that we all are so familiar with.
That's right.
But the book is compelling because throughout it, you're inserting these other stories. This isn't just about David Crespi.
That's right.
It's about a litany.
That's right.
Of these unexplainable acts of violence.
That's right.
And the common thread running through them all is particular drugs and abuse of those drugs and over prescription of those drugs or switching of those drugs.
That's right.
Haphazardly, and it's resulting in psychological breaks within 7 days.
That's right.
Of some aspect of that prescription changing.
That's right.
So that's an extraordinarily compelling. Anyone reading this would just have to say, "Oh my goodness, we have as a nation, we have got to get a little bit more control of this because the evidence is overwhelming."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I incorporate cases from around the world and show how these cases have been adjudicated differently, particularly in the UK. There's one,
David Carmichael.
David Carmichael, who has become a friend.
Was that Canada or UK?
Yeah,
Canada.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. He was from Toronto at the time. So, yeah, and so David Carmichael's case, and check it out. His name is David. His last initial is C. David Crespi, David Carmichael. Yeah. And in the book, it's 2 chapters about him, a tale of 2 countries. So, what happened with David Carmichael was, he was a nationally known physical fitness expert, and was in charge of this program to help Canadians, get into exercise and make healthy choices and things like that. So anyway, the government of Canada X'd out the budget for that program. And so he soon became distressed. He's got 2 children. And so he started on Paxil. His doctor prescribed Paxil, which is...
Is that like a first cousin to Prozac?
It is. It's almost the exact... It's in the family called SSRI antidepressants.
Which we're going to talk about. We're going to define that.
Good.
We got to spend a long time on what those are,
yes,
how they work, and their future.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was trying to keep track of is like the different names
Yeah.
Can you? I know you're on David Carmichael, but real quick,
Yeah.
because we're still early in this. Prozac, Paxil,
Lexapro,
Zoloft,
Zoloft, for sure.
Zoloft.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think Luvox is another one.
Luvox. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are kind of
the big ones. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to get that name out.
That's
Actually,
good.
On my notes, I had like a little spot to write them in because people don't know the term SSRIs.
That's right.
And if you have friends or family who are on Lexapro or Zoloft, like this is for you.
Yes.
So I needed to get those names out. Prozac, Paxil, Lexapro, Zoloft, Luvox. There could be others.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
All right. Sorry. David Carmichael.
Yeah.
Tale of Two Countries.
Right.
He lost his job, essentially. He goes into depression. He's got 2 kids. Go.
Right. Right. And so he's prescribed Paxil. And just to kind of summarize it as quickly as I can, he took his youngest, his only son, 11-year-old Ian, to a.
I thought he had 2 kids.
He did.
Okay.
Yeah. He has a daughter.
Oh, his only son. I'm sorry.
His only son. Yeah.
Yeah. He took his son. Yeah.
His son was like an ardent biking. He loved to be in these biking competitions, so he took him to a competition out of town. They lived in Toronto, and anyway, in the midst of a Paxil-induced psychosis, he strangled Ian to death in their hotel room. And I read about this. He just kind of calmly puts him in the center of the double bed, folds his arms over his chest and kisses his lips and says to him, I love you, Ian, but you're in a much better place now. Then so this is like 2:30 in the morning. Then he just goes over and turns on the television because he doesn't want to disturb the other people in the hotel, and turns on the television and waits until 9 in the morning to call 911. And he calmly calls them, their version of 911. And so by the time the police arrive, he's got his medications on the table. He had tried to sort of poison Ian with too much sleep ease kind of thing, but that didn't work. That's why he strangled him. So he had that. He had all these things all laid out, and he just calmly told him what he had done. And, he really thought he was doing Ian a favor. But anyway, that's a long story. But a big point about this is in Canada, he was found not criminally responsible for his actions. Unlike David Crespi, who was just sent to central prison, and he's been in like 8 different prisons since. David Carmichael was sent to a mental health facility in Ottawa, and he was there for 2 years, where he actually got really good mental health care. Within 2 years, he was able to go and live with his wife and surviving daughter, who had long since forgiven him. And while he was in the mental health care facility, they could come any day they wanted to, walk the grounds, all that kind of stuff. And I talk about this in the book, the contrast to here in North Carolina, and I'm sure in other states. The defense for David Crespi told him that, and I had heard this, they told, because David's brother and Kim both kind of wanted the defense attorneys to maybe consider it an insanity defense. They didn't know any other way to go about this because, anyway, the situation in North Carolina back then, and I hope it's better now, but it was said that if you weren't insane going into a North Carolina state-run mental health facility, it would make you insane, and that and that the kind of clinical care that one can get for these kind of issues, mental health issues, is actually better in our prisons. And I later heard a sheriff, this is about a year ago, from Cary, North Carolina. I just happened to hear it on the radio. And he said he and his men had been embroiled in this horrible case where some mentally ill person had, shot probably his family, and then was shooting at the officers who were trying to apprehend him. And he was saying, we don't know how to handle issues like this. He said, what people don't know is the largest provider of mental health services in North Carolina is our prisons. So anyway, the contrast between Canada and the United States and North Carolina, and I read about another case in Australia, kind of said another guy named David. But the point I sometimes make is, we in America have a merciless criminal justice system for cases like this. Our criminal justice system does a good job with a lot of things, but in cases like this, it's absolutely merciless. And I say, it just seems like our criminal justice system lacks the collective intelligence to deal with cases like this. What do I mean by that? F. Scott Fitzgerald's definition of intelligence is the ability to hold two contradictory ideas in one's head simultaneously.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And so what you have to hold in your head in cases like this is David Carmichael strangled his son to death, committed a horrific crime. That's thought number one. The second thought you have to hold in your mind is David Carmichael was the first victim. David Crespi horrifically killed his innocent twin daughters, defenseless twin daughters. Thought number one. Thought number two, David Crespi was the first victim.
And we can hold those two things in our mind at the same time if we take the time to and care to and bring some level of compassion and true justice, not just merciless justice to the situation. That's beautifully stated, Ed, to hold both of those two thoughts in our minds at the same time. And I think maybe it's interesting to say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And here, treating people who have been a victim of drug abuse, essentially prescribed by medical professionals,
right?
Treating them the same way over and over again, expecting different results, and continuing to prescribe these medications without informed consent, without the data, without the statistics being made known, without the pharmaceutical companies being held liable.
Yes.
We expect different results. We're out of our minds. We're as insane as the people on the drugs.
Amen, brother. Amen.
So let's go back now to the hearing. Now, there's not a trial, to be clear, right?
That's right.
Because let's go prior.
Yeah.
David Crespi calls 911.
Yeah.
They show up. And let me tell you one, I'm gonna tear up now.
Yeah.
Damn it. The most moving part of the entire book to me was the story when one of the police officers who goes upstairs finds the second twin, Tess, and he grabs her and runs outside looking for the paramedic because he could have sworn he felt her pulse.
That's right.
And the paramedic then has to explain, no, she's been dead a long time. You're feeling your own pulse.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Exactly.
Why did that hit me so hard?
Oh, well, of course. Yeah. I mean, you have empathy. And I mean, I didn't include this in the book. There was a young police officer who had just started her job, maybe 3 or 4 days before all this, young woman. And so she was called to that scene and she quit.
Yeah.
right after. And they, this is in the chapter about the hearing, but, these experienced guys that had been to crime scenes said, this was the most horrific thing they'd seen. They'd seen, airplane crashes, things like that. So it had a devastating effect on a lot of first responders who are still dealing with it.
Still dealing with it.
Yeah.
By the way, Joe Rogan actually makes a big point about, police officers have statistically, I guess, almost more reason to have PTSD than a lot of people who are deployed out there to Afghanistan or something, because they see tragedies like daily.
Yeah, exactly.
And they don't have the resources. The government's not providing the resources to help them with this. So now let's go to he's arrested. Now it's odd that both him and David Carmichael, and I think others that we talk about, if they didn't commit suicide, well, usually this ends in suicide. Yeah. I don't know if that's usual. I should say usually. I don't know. It seems like a heavy dosage often. But there's something even more, I guess the insanity of the situation is kind of proven by their calmness.
Yeah, exactly.
It's this eerie, like I sit down and watch TV for 5 hours because I don't want to wake up people in the hotel, and then I line up the medication so that the police officers have everything.
That's right.
And David Crespi changes his clothes and sits down and just calls 911.
Yeah.
They're not freaking out.
That's right.
And it's because they're really freaking out. Like that deep down, they have freaked out. They have lost their tether to reality.
That's right.
And externally, they're perfectly calm looking.
That's right.
Because they're unattached to reality. They have they've drifted out to sea.
Exactly.
They're gone. They're psychological.
They're in the midst of a psychosis.
They're in the midst of a psychosis.
Right.
And so let's bring that back to the moment with Crespi.
Yeah.
Where the police come and get him.
Yeah. And
interview him.
Yeah.
And that's
9 hours.
9 hours. Take us through that, and I have some questions about what he did and did not do in that whole process. But tell us that story.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's taken into custody, and immediately interviewed by a couple, at least two detectives over 9 hours. No defense attorney present. It was taped. I had Kim Crespi gave me a DVD of that entire thing.
And it's like in the room. He's at a table in a chair, like we've seen many times on YouTube or wherever. And you've been able to watch the video.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that public record?
That's a good question. I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
The reason I ask is not because I want to watch it.
Yeah.
But it's because it wasn't made. What?
Yeah.
Help me with that. Okay, you're going to tell us what happened in there, but I'm jumping the gun.
Yeah.
But here, that wasn't available to the prosecution or to the defense attorneys by the time their hearing happened. Is that right? Like, did the justice system utilize this 9 hours of video, which his insanity is shown?
Yeah, exactly. It's just
this available to them?
It was available to the defense team because Jim Cooney, who was the main defense lawyer, kind of refers to some of the things that happened during that interview. So he had clearly studied it, and
good.
So
good,
exactly. And so there's so many signs that David was seriously psychotic. One of them was they were asking him, why did you feel like you had to kill both of them? Why didn't you just stop, and why did you feel like you had to well, they're twins, they go together, this weird kind of logic. And I think he talks about, the voices were telling me to do this. And then one of the things that Jim Cooney talked about in the hearing was David, the detectives leave him alone kind of toward the end, and he just sits there and he starts saying, pride, pride, pride. And he says it like 49 times or something like that. And then Mecklenburg County, it's almost like Rain Man or something, Mecklenburg County, repeats that multiple times. And
do you have any guess what he meant by pride?
Yeah, exactly. It's puzzled me ever since. That's a really good question. I really don't know. I really don't know. And and one thing that Jim Cooney noticed was that every once in a while, one of the detectives would leave and go behind the glass window, one-way glass window, and he had found out that there was a prosecutor team lawyers was there, kind of counseling the detectives about what to ask him, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets into that a little bit in the hearing, but multiple signs that David was just psychotic.
When did he talk about he could transport himself like in Star Trek? And then also, when did he speak that the sprinklers in the yard told him to do it?
Yeah.
Was that in this 9-hour interview? I'm confused.
I think he, I got a little confused by the timing of that too. I think he may have told one of the arresting officers, while he's kind of out on the driveway, about the sprinklers talking to him. Yeah, but the other one where he thought he was a religious leader and could go through walls and things like that. That happened like not long after he was taken into the jail
system.
Yeah, exactly. And then one thing that happened was at Central Prison at one point he thought he was in San Quentin, and that apparently that got back to the warden, and the warden got mad at him for saying that, comparing their lovely jail to San Quentin. And so anyway,
how does a man who tells the arresting officers that the sprinklers told him to do it and that he can transport himself and he's a religious leader and is like Rain Man reciting words over and over again 49 times straight without break?
Exactly.
Exactly. How is this man mentally capable of making a plea deal to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole? How can a man, this man could not be held responsible for buying a car.
That's right.
How could he sign a plea deal? How could the plea deal be valid with this level of insanity on the record unless he's acting?
Yeah, exactly. That's such a good question. Yeah, and the irony is, and again, when you think about what the defense lawyers were confronted with, we have to go back and say that the prosecutors wanted the death penalty, and the key prosecutor in the case had won a death penalty case against Jim Cooney about a year prior.
His lawyer, David's
lawyer, and Jim Cooney's client was executed. So Jim Cooney and those lawyers were terrified if they went to a jury trial that would happen to David. They, again, the whole thing about the insanity plea, there's no alternative really, for a mental health place in North Carolina that could make him sane again, and so they just thought the best of the awful alternatives was to make this plea deal.
So here's where it gets very hard for me. And I think it gets very hard. I mean, the whole thing's hard. I mean, it's stupid. You can't talk about this without sounding insensitive or dumb. You know what I mean?
I know exactly.
But still, where it gets particularly difficult for my brain, not my heart per se, is in the transcript with the hearing, the prosecution points out that David had visions of violence for some time before this.
Yeah.
And that came out, I think, I remember, I will not name names, but I remember people who were intimately knowledgeable of this situation 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember, my wife and I were talking about this, we remember being with somebody who was fairly prominent. And he said, if the guy had had the guts, he would have just killed himself.
Yeah.
What he was referring to is that it became known pretty quickly that David Crespi had visions of violence and temptations of violence before he killed the twins. That came out somehow early on.
Yeah.
Right after he was arrested, somehow this became known.
Yeah.
And people were saying that. Why didn't the SOB just kill himself?
Yeah.
That was their way of expressing the frustration that if he had, ideations of violence,
right?
Why in the world did he not handle this? Why did Kim leave him with the children? What did she know?
Right.
That's where this gets complicated, and the prosecution seized on this big time, and I think that helped drive the nail home,
right?
To put him away.
That's
and
right.
I think the judge heavily relied on that. The judge injected himself into basically cross-examining David or some of the experts.
That's right.
I think this, if he had, I don't know this. I don't know. I don't want to misspeak, but this wrinkle in this, that he had delusions of violence, or I don't know how to say it. I don't even have the right terminology, but he had envisioned violence. And I think he had violence towards his family. I'm unclear on that, but given that was a factor in all of this,
right?
What do you do with that? And because the prosecution seized on it, and I think that's what put him away permanently. So help me with that whole situation.
That's a very key question. He had these ideations of harming his family, and I went back and I've got the transcript of the Superior Court hearing, excerpts of it in the book.
Yeah,
and I went back and really studied each episode that David had with depression, and what came out in the Observer was that. And Oprah Winfrey implied on a show that she did about the case.
Yeah, which we should talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
Because his state of mind is a very important part of the whole history here. Sorry, but
No. This is a very key thing to talk about. But Oprah Winfrey had said, and she was, I think, I won't go there, but she basically said, at one point in the broadcast, that David had been having these thoughts of harming or killing his family for 11 years,
Mm-hmm.
Now the reporting in the Charlotte Observer, and I think the Charlotte Observer was able to look at the DVD, basically revealed that these what they call intrusive thoughts, these dark thoughts, these thoughts of killing somebody in your family, only happened when David was on these antidepressants. So, I wanted. Let's see if I can find this. Yes. So to this point, I cite the work of a Welsh psychiatrist named Dr. David Healy in the book often. So I'm going to quote from him about these dark thoughts and where they come from. Okay.
Yeah.
But it surrounds. This is at the end of one of the cases that I mentioned in the book, and that is on August the 1st, 1999. 74-year-old Australian David Hawkins, a model citizen with no prior history of violence, attacked his 68-year-old wife, strangling her to death. He immediately called Australia's equivalent of 911, and the call was recorded. And here's what he says. It's eerily similar to David Crespi. I have killed my wife. I got tablets from the doctor yesterday, and I think they were too strong. Yesterday. I went absolutely wild. I don't know. I've got to go. I'm heading out and I'm going to get rid of myself. Nobody could help me now. I'm shaking here. I can't wait. I can't stop. The tablets David Hawkins had taken were Zoloft. When he hung up, Hawkins attempted to asphyxiate himself with carbon monoxide from his car. He stopped because he was worried about the effect that 2 deaths would have on his daughter. You know, so why didn't David Crespi just kill himself?
Right.
You know, Hawkins was charged with murder. At the trial, the judge accepted a defense of automatism, meaning that Hawkins wasn't responsible for his actions. Quote, and this is the judge, the Supreme Court judge saying this, quote, but for the Zoloft, which he took on the morning of August the 1st, 1999, it is overwhelmingly probable that Mrs. Hawkins would not have been killed on that morning. Okay, so this is where I get into these intrusive thoughts. Right below that, the Australian Supreme Court quoted, quote, evidence from the Department of Health and Aged Care of 510 Australian patients on Zoloft who reacted badly, wrote these 2 reporters. Quote, the world's leading expert critic of Zoloft, Dr. David Healy of the University of Wales College of Medicine, claims the 510 figure is undoubtedly wrong and that between 5,100 and 51,000 would be more realistic. The truth, he says, can never be known because patients keep their feelings to themselves, fearing what will happen if they reveal murderous thoughts. And this is a key quote from Healy. Imagine that you are taking Zoloft and you start to have feelings that you want to murder your children. So he's saying this in 1999, 7 years before what. Let me go back.
Yeah.
Imagine that you are taking Zoloft and you start to have feelings that you want to murder your children, Healy said from Canada yesterday. Quote, how can you speak about it if you think that you might get locked up?
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.
So to flash forward to the Oprah Winfrey Show,
Yeah.
you know, if that's okay.
Yes.
To flash forward to that, you know, and we can get into some other aspects of that interview, but she toward the end,
Just so people know, Oprah
yeah,
dedicated an hour to David Crespi.
that's right.
That's a big deal. Like a lot of people don't know that.
That's right.
That's a big deal. That shows how prominent this case was.
That's exactly right. And it aired in November of 2006. So, you know, not terribly long after the tragedy. But
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. No, that's right. And she went to Central Prison to interview David in person, and you know that's shown in the video. And she interviewed Kim in front of a live audience. You know, probably in Chicago. And so, but Ms. Winfrey toward the end of her interviews with both David and Kim said, okay, here's what I think the lesson of all this is. The lesson is that if David had just shared with his therapist that he was having these thoughts of hurting someone, you know, killing somebody in the family, we all wouldn't be here. If he had just shared those, and you know, she talked about his behavior of the morning of the killings, and you know, she basically said, you know, he was not psychotic, that he was just, it was all sort of premeditated, et cetera, et cetera. And as I referred to earlier, she said he'd been having these thoughts continuously for like 11 years, entertaining them, which is
That's not accurate.
patently false.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and the thing is, oh, and then I capture this moment.
How does she get away with saying something so patently false? Based on what information
Exactly.
did this national figure say something to taint the reputation
Yeah.
of someone who is powerless at this point with his own reputation?
Yeah, I think, hope this doesn't get me into trouble, but I think I think basically she was fed that that thought or concept by the prosecution team in advance of the interview. But here's an interesting part of the program, and I write about this toward the end of the chapter about the Oprah Winfrey show on this. So she's reading a teleprompter, and by this time, she had called on a forensic psychiatrist who was sitting there in the front row of the live audience named Dr. Michael Wellner, and she's reading a teleprompter, and she says at one point, and so it's not uncommon for people like David Crespi to hide his not mention his dark thoughts, and then she almost like hesitates, and then she just totally changes the subject. But Michael Wellner had some wisdom about how depression should be treated, et cetera, at the end of the show. But that whole subject about the dark, intrusive thoughts.
There's a Greek word for that, and I can't pronounce it right. You want to help me?
Yeah.
Akathisia.
Akathisia. Okay.
Akathisia.
Yeah, and this is a very important subject. The first two sentences in my prologue are, this is a true story about a terrible family tragedy, a tragedy made more terrible by how preventable it was. What do I mean by that? 15 hours before David Crespi killed his innocent 5-year-old twins, the family was gathered in I think maybe the kitchen, and they were playing a board game together, including the two little twins. The family notices that David is pacing erratically around their very spacious house while they're playing the game. He's going from the dining room into the living room, back around furniture, et cetera, and back to the table. Later, Kim Crespi notices he's jumping in and out of their bed erratically. She recently told me there was a square rug beside their bed, and he was going kind of manically from corner to corner. Okay, so what was going on with that? He was experiencing akathisia. Akathisia, it's a side effect. What it means is the inability to sit still. What it really means is that the body is going into toxicity. That is, he's becoming psychotic. It should be a glaring warning sign that he is in danger of harming either himself or others. But of course, the Crespi family had no idea what that was. They had not been told about this side. This is a fairly common side effect of these SSRI antidepressants. Sometimes, in some studies, 10 to 25% of people experience this. But
let me read the technical definition, which you provided on page 117.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is Bregan.
Yeah, Dr. Peter Bregan. Yes.
Bregan defines I can't say the word.
Akathisia.
Akathisia.
Yeah.
Like amnesia, akathisia.
Yeah.
Bregan defines akathisia as, quote, a drug-induced neurological disorder that is known to drive people to suicide and violence and to madness. Akathisia means the inability to sit still, and the syndrome is usually but not always associated with a compulsive need to move about in a futile attempt to stop the torment. Quote, you might assume that such a dreadful and potentially deadly adverse drug reaction must be relatively rare. To the contrary, we have known for nearly 2 decades that akathisia is commonly associated with SSRIs.
Yes, sir.
This Kim and the family would have no way of knowing that this was happening.
That's right.
But the studies did know.
That's right. And it was suppressed. So speaking of studies, I don't have this particular case in the book, but it is from my source, Dr. David Healy. Okay, so check this out. Speaking of studies about this involved Zoloft.
Okay.
And so in 1983, and the reason that year is important is that
it's a long time ago. That's one reason it's important.
Yeah, that's right. And it's also 4 years before the first SSRI Prozac was approved to be in the American market. So it's 4 years before that. But these drug companies were doing these tests before they launched them into the public. And here's what one of the tests revealed. In 1983, 9 years before the launch of Zoloft in the United States, 21 years before the FDA required Pfizer to put a black box warning on it, Pfizer had done a healthy volunteer trial on Zoloft in the United Kingdom. They recruited 12 women for this trial. Half of them were to be given Zoloft. The other half were given a placebo. Mm-hmm. The trial was due to run for 2 weeks, but it was stopped after 1 week because every single woman taking Zoloft had become anxious, apprehensive, agitated. In other words, akathisia. 1 or 2 had begun to voice thoughts about harming others. Women, they healthy. Yeah. They had started to voice thoughts about harming others. Yeah. All of the things that led the FDA to put a black box warning on this drug 21 years later were there in 1983. And Pfizer looked at this trial and wrote down Zoloft has caused this problem, but they just, like so many of these trials that I write about, they bury it.
I can't, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, either your research is bunk.
Yeah.
And that original source that you're pulling from is bunk.
Right. He found it in their records.
It's in their records.
Yeah.
How do they get away with it? How could they release that drug onto the market?
Exactly.
When all of them
exactly
are showing symptoms, and half of them are what was the half? The 1 out of 2? What were they?
Yeah, voicing violent. Violent thoughts. That's right.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And so, I guess it's just, how can this be on the market? Is this it's hard to stay on a chronological path with David's story.
Right.
It's hard.
It is.
But I'm glad we covered that, because he was having these ideations of violence.
Yes.
But so were all the people, not all, but a big chunk of the people who were tested on these drugs before they ever went on the market.
That's exactly right.
And the pharmaceutical company knows. It's like, sort of, why do you even do the trials if you were going to ignore the results?
Exactly.
Like just throw crap out there if you're not going to pay attention to your studies.
Exactly.
So okay. Now let's go back. By the way, was Zoloft the first one that hit the market?
Prozac.
Prozac was the first on the market.
So let me quickly tell a tale about Prozac and how they kind of the nefarious way that they got that approved.
And by the way, is Zoloft and Prozac two different big companies? One's Zoloft is Pfizer.
Yes.
And then who's Prozac?
Prozac is Eli Lilly.
Okay.
Right. And Paxil is GlaxoSmithKline, with a big office in Raleigh.
Okay.
So check this out about Eli Lilly and Prozac. So this is circa 1984 or so.
Right around the same time
that the Zoloft trial was going on, and so Eli Lilly really kind of wanted to eventually introduce their new wonder drug into Europe, because that would be a very lucrative market, and so they targeted Germany to be the first country to approve it. So here's what happened in that case. In 1984, German health authorities summarily rejected Prozac, asserting that they had discovered through their own research that the SSRI, quote, increased suicidal risk and agitation, in other words, akathisia, and had, quote, no efficacy. Therefore, Prozac was deemed, quote, totally unsuited for the treatment of depression. So this not only created a problem for Eli Lilly in Europe, it was also a major obstacle for Lilly getting Prozac approved in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So how was Lilly able to overcome this seemingly insurmountable obstacle? According to a former Lilly employee, Lilly sent the FDA, quote, a version of events that glossed over the problem, unquote. Lilly simply informed the FDA that all the questions from the German experts had been answered and that since then, the German health authorities had, quote, not contacted Eli Lilly either with doubts or with questions. So the FDA believed what Eli Lilly told them, and in 1987, Prozac was approved for the U.S. market.
It's inconceivable.
Yeah.
We have said SSRI many times.
Yes.
I still want to go through the rest of David's story, but we just got to say what SSRIs are at this point. Otherwise, listeners are just like, "What is this?" Because
let's do it.
Yeah, go ahead. I had to write it all out because it's hard for me to remember.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go through like a medical lesson here.
No, that's right.
We got to talk about SSRIs.
Yeah, let's try to put it in plain language and succinct if we can. So the SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and that's kind of fancy language for the desired effect is for the pills, the molecules to enhance the presence of a neurotransmitter called serotonin, and we have the brain has over 100 different neurotransmitters, but back when these things were being developed, they thought that serotonin, by increasing the level of serotonin in your brain, was like the silver bullet that would solve depression. So that's in plain language is kind of, and as we've seen.
Help me understand why it's okay. So selective serotonin, I got that. Reuptake, okay, making it go back up. That's what that sounds like to me. But then inhibitor sounds like it's going the other way. Yeah. That's why I get confused on what that means.
I know. That was kind of mind-boggling to me as well. I can't remember exactly.
Right. It sounds like it's the reverse. But
it sounds like just scientific gobbledygook.
Right. That's okay. That's okay. But SSRIs have made a pretty big national. Go ahead. Suddenly it flashed to me. So,
the whole thing about reuptake, that I think that meant that like the brain kind of naturally absorbs the serotonin neurotransmitter, and so these drugs inhibited the absorption, thereby increasing the level of it.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is
like
an English major trying to.
No. Your research has been incredible.
Thank you.
But yeah. So all right. So at some point, I do want to talk about placebo effect because that's a fascinating thing.
Yes.
But that's what these SSRIs. You've given us a couple examples of Zoloft and Prozac, the trials before it ever went on the market, before it was approved by the FDA.
Right.
And apparently that was just swept under the rug. They just seemingly did not care or did not believe the initial results of these trials.
Also, in the chapter called A History of Antidepressants, mm-hmm. I have a section about how early on some members of the FDA were complicit in helping the companies hide the negative clinical trial results. Yeah. I mean, this is all about money, is what it really is. It's all about money.
Do you feel like you're like entering into some big conspiracy theory kind of thing?
And that was.
I mean, you start to feel like a weirdo going into this. Because this is the stuff that this is kind of a lot of the just normal people think that what you're talking about is kind of fringe.
Yeah, exactly. No, that and that I was very cognizant of that I would be accused of being kind of a conspiracy theorist. And so, somebody asked me about how I approached my research, and that is, I approached it as a kind of a sleuth researcher. And basically, my attitude was only the finest minds in neuroscience and psychiatry, and some of the youngest minds, neuroscience and investigative reporting, all that need apply for this book to be used in this book. I've got over 160 footnotes in this book. Yeah. So I am not presenting my opinion in this, in any of this. Basically, I am citing scholarly works, and another important thing was no conspiracy theorists need apply to be in this book. So I was very cognizant of that, and so I those 160 footnotes are almost like an invitation to skeptical readers. Okay, you want to see whether you want to test the veracity of what I find in this book? Be my guest. Follow each one of these. Go read this. These are objective facts. These are not conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and they're hard. It's funny when people talk in just general discussion. Well, the studies show this when they're talking about something. Yeah. That means they read a CNN article.
That's right.
But you actually went and found the studies.
Yeah.
By PhDs, laboratories, pharmaceutical companies, whatever it is. Like you found as much of the original sources as you possibly could.
Exactly.
All right. So let's go back though. Let's kind of keep marching through the David story.
Yes.
He is. Anything else about his hearing? Now, he makes a statement, which the lawyers probably helped him write.
They did.
But he makes a statement. He pleads to. He makes a plea deal to avoid the death penalty,
and to avoid exposing his family about all the horrors. Imagine him sitting there and everything, pictures and the expense and all. He multiple motives, but yeah.
Did David have any idea what he was doing when he signed the plea deal? Like, how do you factor through? How do you take into consideration the drugs that he was on when he went in? As soon as he went into the prison system, they changed up his meds again.
They did.
So here we are, just pounding on more crap on top of more crap.
That's right.
And then he signs a deal. So what was his state of mind? And you've also argued that in the Oprah Winfrey, which is again like a year late, he still wasn't clean-headed.
That's right.
He was still on meds over and over again.
That's right.
And he gets moved around, gets put on different meds. But at the hearing, he says, I'd like to thank I'd like to thank the best medical care I've ever gotten in the prison system.
Yeah, exactly.
What do I do with all of that? Where was his state of mind at this hearing and when he signed this plea deal?
That's right. I got to talk to David and correspond with him via letters about all this, and he told me about all that. And what he told me was, yes. So, and by the way, as you go through the Superior Court hearing chapter, what you see is an expert says that he had been misdiagnosed, that he actually had bipolar II disorder, and therefore, by the time he makes this statement at the court, he had been switched to different medications to treat that disorder, and so they had, but they had just switched him from one SSRI to another. They had switched him from Prozac to Lexapro, and then I think there was an antipsychotic called Risperdal, and then lithium, and lithium. And you mentioned, so he was on that, and he wrote to me. He said, the lithium made me feel like an inert battery. I would agree to anything, and so that's when the plea deal was put in front of him, when he was on the lithium, et cetera, and he thought that he had signed for 2 concurrent life
versus
terms.
consecutive.
And so it was and he may have, and they may have just changed, but at the end of the Superior Court hearing, he sentenced the 2 consecutive. But yeah, he was in a fog when he heard that.
He was shocked. I think Kim is the one that told him later on, you signed 2 consecutive life.
Exactly.
And he was shocked.
Exactly, he was. And
concurrent runs at the same time, consecutive is one after the other. So you have 2 life sentences, you're never getting out.
That's exactly right. So, flashing back to the Oprah show, Oprah interviewed him in Central Prison, and you could see his hand visibly shaking during that interview, and that is a classic side effect of lithium. So I write in the book that, and I tried to give Ms. Winfrey the benefit of the doubt about this. When she was interviewing David, she probably thought that they had gotten his meds right finally, and she was interviewing a guy who was clear-headed and all that. But of course he wasn't. And so in effect, she was asking him, and she asked him about how many times did you stab Samantha, She was asking him in this newly drugged state to remember what he had done in the midst of a psychosis under the influence of other drugs, and she had no idea.
Sure.
But he kind of does the best that he can. But she confronted him with questions like, why didn't you just kill yourself? And you think you deserve to live? So you could kind of see where she had hoped. And she also sort of, at the beginning, she sort of kind of lightly makes fun of Kim for being able to forgive him.
Yeah.
And drive to prison to see him.
Yeah. Yeah, she does. I read the transcript, and it's kind of very poor taste in how she handles this woman who's been through this. She makes light of a woman's mercy for her husband.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So he signs he signs the deal.
Yeah.
What did you make of the judge's involvement in the hearing? Because as I read it, I mean, I wasn't a litigator. I spent time in federal court as a law clerk, but it seemed odd to me how much the judge injected himself into this hearing.
It seemed odd to me too. Yeah, at the end. There'd been this very formidable witness named Dr. Tabrizi, an Iranian, very distinguished forensic psychiatrist who was working at Duke at the time. And she broke down into tears at one time because she had reviewed the case, and she had said that David's psychiatrist had not asked him the kind of questions that they should have, and that maybe something could have come of that. But she's the one that diagnosed him with bipolar II disorder. So the judge just breaks in at toward the end, because that had been really riveting testimony, her testimony. So he just again, boy, I know a lot less than you about the procedures in court, but I found it very unusual. Suddenly he breaks in and he says, "Are you the only one that's ever diagnosed him as having bipolar II disorder?" And I think she says that maybe one other person had, but others, and I've got this, I got hold of some of the records of the intake procedures that were done. Others thought, no, this was just clearly, some kind of psychosis, and they did not think it was bipolar II disorder. But the judge really kind of tested her on that, and I just found that very, very unusual. Almost like teaming up with the prosecution. And
I
It was interesting.
Do you have any thoughts after reading the records about the prosecution's tactics in this whole process? Do you have anything you want to say about that?
I hope I can share this. Kim recently told me that that not only did they tell her that they were, her and her team, that they were going to go for the death penalty, they also told her that she needed to get her own lawyers because they were considering charging her with being an accomplice. Now, and during the hearing, she was very insulted by the prosecutor who was interrogating her on the stand. Irritated that person implied that David and Kim got married too fast after the death of his first wife. Like there was something insidious about that. And so, yeah, those tactics were, like you say, highly inappropriate, and just the things that Kim had to bear. There's a very moving moment that I think about a lot at the end of that Superior Court hearing, where Jim Cooney is he's got Kim on the stand. She's giving her testimony, and he asks her, "Do you still love David after all of this?" And she said, "Of course I do. You don't stop loving somebody because they're sick." In sickness and in health, you don't stop loving somebody because they're sick. That was riveting.
Yeah, it is. How long did it take for David to become his true self?
Yeah, he
meaning freed from what I mean by true self.
Yeah.
I think what I mean by it, let me say this.
Yeah.
I think what I mean by true self is David Crespi without drugs in the system.
Yeah. Yeah, he eventually started to suffer liver damage from the lithium and other bad side effects from the other drugs they were giving him. So he decided to withdraw, and that's a big factor in the book. Withdrawing from these drugs can be very dangerous unless they're just done under, very close medical supervision. Have to be tapered. And so anyway, he withdrew from these drugs, and I remember my wife and I went with Kim to visit David in prison during this period, and he was wild. Some of he was not himself while he was withdrawing. And that's why a lot of people stay on these drugs, is because the withdrawal effects can be worse than the original sort of symptoms.
Is this when he was saying very inappropriate things to Kim?
Yeah, exactly. And I witnessed that.
Did you really?
I did. And so it took him.
You kind of gloss over it in the book.
Yeah,
I'm sure for obvious reasons, but. Was it sexual in connotation? I mean, that's what I kind of gleaned from that, is like he was being crude with her.
Yeah, that's a decent way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, and you just knew.
It didn't sound like him at all.
That's not exactly. That's not him.
That's not him. And that my point is that if a man who has never talked like that in some kind of crude sexual kind of way to his spouse, all of a sudden starts doing that in front of strangers, you know something's going on. Something's going on.
Exactly. So yeah.
And what was going on is withdrawal.
That's right. Exactly right. So I'm trying to remember. It took at least 6 months, I think, maybe almost a year. And I think he started to do that in 2008. I'll have to check those facts, but he started withdrawing, and he did have some help in the prison. I think the psychiatrist kind of helped him withdraw. But when it was clear that he was back to his old self, he appeared in a 2013 Danish documentary, and so he's on camera right at the beginning. He's lost the weight. He's clear-eyed. His feelings are readily available to him, and there's this heartbreaking moment where he says, "They told me I left a knife in one of my little girl's chest," and he just breaks down crying.
See, they told me
that. Yeah, he
doesn't remember.
Not at all.
So what does he remember
exactly
about the situation? Do you know?
What he was saying to Oprah during that interview was, he just remembered these intrusive thoughts telling him, you need to do it now. While Kim's away, you need to do this now. And he clearly, I think he did tell the detectives what the little girl's last words were, and that's terribly heartbreaking.
So, but do you know what those words were?
So Samantha, the first twin that he killed, said, "Daddy, you're hurting me. Daddy, you're hurting me." And then Tess, it was like men on the beach at Normandy, "Mommy, mommy," calling for mom. Those were the last words.
So he remembered it as he's being taken out to the police car.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the episode. So
That's right.
But I'm curious if he remembers that today.
Exactly. Exactly. Me too. It's so murky, isn't it? It's so very murky.
And I know that just in our own normal life, when we're told about an event so frequently, we end up like telling ourselves we remember it, even if we don't remember it.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, today, if you asked him, "Do you remember murdering your children?"
Yeah.
I wonder how much he actually remembers versus all of the thoughts that have been in his mind after the fact, for 20 years. So I don't know the answer. But you never really sat down and did you interview David for this book?
Over the phone and via letters, and both of which were monitored, of course. The phone, you've got like 2 minutes, maybe 3, and somebody's listening to it,
How can you get anything done at that?
I know the letters were more revealing. We've
gotten a lot of letters from David, by the way, because he distributes Catholic books in the prison.
Yeah.
So he writes us letters.
Yeah.
Asking for certain books and then thanking us for donating to them.
That's fantastic.
So I mean, I get the letters and I've read them.
Yeah.
Perfectly lucid man by this point.
That's right. And one of the really moving parts of a letter that he sent me was like, so this wasn't terribly long after he was imprisoned, and so he was told by a fellow inmate that a Catholic priest was visiting the prison, and this fellow inmate urged that he find a way to talk to this Catholic priest. Why was the Catholic priest visiting? He was there to witness an execution the next morning. Mm. And so David did get to talk with him and make his first confession after the killings. Mm-hmm. And this is profoundly moving. He said he said it was the first time he was able to cry after the event.
Do you remember how long that would have been?
Oh gosh, weeks, definitely weeks. And so he confesses, and the priest says, "This was not a mortal sin. You were out of your mind. You are forgiven." and just what a profound effect that had on him. And that's the hardest thing in these cases. David Carmichael talks about it. Others talk about it. Is forgiving yourself, being able to forgive yourself. Why couldn't I have stopped this?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So, so he goes to prison. One of the interesting things to me was that it took a long time before he could meet with his family.
Yeah.
Because they, in our justice system, were deemed to be victims.
Right. Exactly.
And so you have to get, court approval or something.
That's right.
I don't know how, but his wife couldn't visit him even though she wanted to.
Yeah.
Help me understand how that happened. And then
Yeah.
you bring us to where he meets with his living children for the first time after this happened, because that had to have been a powerful moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. As to why it took so long, I think it took 6 weeks or so for them to get the first letter from David. At least, and think about this. They moved back into that house. They had nowhere else to go. They moved back into that house, which had been a crime scene. Like a very generous neighbor. The police just left it the way it was.
Yeah,
they didn't clean it up.
You have to clean.
Yeah. So a neighbor paid for the place to be cleaned before they got back in. And I was at a mass. Father Reed in Charlotte did a mass in the home there with a bunch of us friends, and he went around and it sprinkled holy water on the spots where the two girls were, almost exercising.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. And that was profoundly moving. But
Father Reed is one of the greatest pastors anyone could ever ask for, and I believe at the time he was stationed. Well, he was at St. Mark's, never at St. Matthew's. So I don't know how he would have gotten.
I think he was at St. Matthew at the time.
Was he?
Yeah.
He? Okay.
Monsignor McSweeney.
Maybe I misspoke.
Yeah, I think he was.
Misunderstanding where he was then.
Yeah.
But he's been at St. Anne's for all these years, and he's been our pastor for a long time.
He's a wonderful priest. Wonderful.
So I can't think of anybody better to have there.
Yes.
And to bring a certain spiritual presence and grace and exorcism into that house, because no matter what David's level of culpability was, evil was
absolutely
present in this house, and the church's grace and the rites of exorcism were perfectly fitting to clean this place up, along with a maid service.
Absolutely.
Spiritual and supernatural cleansing.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. After my wife and I made our Curcio weekend, one of the kind of veterans of the Curcio movement told us, like 2 days after the weekend, our weekend was over, the devil doesn't like it when this sort of spiritual renewal is happening. Almost always something unexpected, something awful happens not long after these Curcio weekends, because and
here we are.
There we go.
Okay, so the neighbors clean up the house. Father Reed comes over and purifies the house spiritually.
Yeah.
It takes them 6 weeks to even get a letter.
That's
David.
exactly right.
And so then so bring us up to when they actually get to see their dad and husband.
Yeah. First was just getting Kim to be able to see him, and I think that was maybe 6 months, maybe 8, for her to be able to see him. And she writes about it in her journal, and David Carmichael's account of first seeing his wife for the first time is just eerily similar. The first thing, there's a glass partition, and Kim writes that she's okay with that, but they both just look at each other and cry, and she and he just says, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about, I don't know why, I'm so sorry. And I should have been able to defeat the thoughts or whatever, something to that effect. And, and she says, she knew pretty darn quickly that it wasn't really him that did it. So she says, she looks at him after he says that, and her heart is filled with love and forgiveness. So I think that was like 8 months. And then, the 3 kids went, I think the first time they visited was not long before Easter or something like that, somewhere in there. But that was at least a year afterwards.
And how old were his children at the time?
At the time of the killings, the oldest was 17. It was 17, 13, and 8, maybe 8 or 7. Yeah.
So you got an 8-year-old kid who doesn't see his dad for a year.
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right. And yet, just when Kim came back from her trip to get her hair cut, she's pulled over, she's taken into a neighbor's house, and a detective there tells her what happened. And then he says to her, "You're gonna have to be both the father and the mother from now on." And I write about there's a chapter, Home Alone, and for a couple of months there, some family members stayed in the area, friends were surrounding her, but pretty soon after that, some of those friends started to walk away, couldn't believe that she would not divorce him, and thought he should have been executed.
Yeah.
So, the enormity of having to be both the father and the mother hits her, and one of the boys starts having, he couldn't sleep in his own bed there for a while because he was having anxiety attacks. So
understandably so.
Exactly. Then he would sleep in her room, and but still he had anxiety. Twice he had anxiety attacks so severe he had to be hospitalized.
Oh gosh.
And so right after the killings, the police went to each school where the 3 children were in class. Three separate police cars collected them from those 3 different places and took them up to uptown Charlotte to interview them, et cetera. So the reason I'm mentioning that is talking about school. For a while after the killings, when particularly the 2 boys were being taken to their schools, they would have flashbacks to being taken out of class, and so they would have anxiety attacks and things like that. So Kim had to homeschool at one time or another.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think simultaneously, but those 2 boys, and she did a spectacular job. I mean, the oldest boy went to Belmont Abbey, and graduated with honors. Went to Notre Dame, to get his CPA.
A free ride, by the way, to Belmont Abbey, if I recall.
The daughter got
the daughter did. Okay,
yeah,
because of trying to help out the family.
Oh yeah, the monks were fantastic to the family.
Okay, good.
Yeah, invited Kim to Vespers, and they were incredibly compassionate. It helped her get through it.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the ongoing relationship like after they meet their father? You have a very telling account of how they met their dad and how some of the kids were a little bit closer to him and some were more withdrawn. Withdrawn. But what was the relationship like over the last 20 years between his kids and him?
Yeah, they of course absolutely forgave him, and so he would start writing letters, and he was able to call and talk to them briefly. He was very good about calling at least once a week, and Kim drove to his prison once a week, and that was like almost like 4-hour round trip, alone in her van, but he became the best dad that he could from a distance like that, and gave them advice. The son who became a really good CPA, I think he helped coach him some, and just was his old self eventually, and they grew back together and nurtured a good relationship.
So at this point, David, not this point, but I guess a couple years after the crime, David is free of medication, right?
Yeah.
It took a number of years to get
months at least.
Okay.
Yeah, at least 6-8 months.
So he gets totally sober. There's a quote in your book that I wanted to ask you about. Kim says at one point she has like a revelation. She says something to the effect of, "I'm not sure David ever was mentally ill."
Exactly.
What did she mean by that?
Exactly. And I came to agree with her. So if you kind of closely examine each of the incidents or major depressive episodes that are in that section about the Superior Court hearing, I notice a kind of common occurrence, and that is what happens is, so David, so the savings bank that David was the CFO of in Sacramento, the youngest CFO in the history of the savings bank out there, Sacramento Savings, at age 29, that gets bought. So he's put into a new, less supportive kind of environment, more hard-edged, what's the bottom line kind of thing. So, and this is a common theme throughout all the episodes. He starts getting anxious and has insomnia. So what they start out doing is giving him these meds for insomnia. And clearly, when you just watch what unfolded over the years, his system did not agree. His DNA or whatever did not agree with those alone. There was an episode where he drove up to some bridge in California and almost threw himself off. Somehow he didn't do it, and he called his dad. His dad lived there in California, and mom, and they came to kind of rescue him. And he hands them a bottle of pills, and they were sleeping pills. He says, "Take these from me. They're just not doing, they're doing something terrible to me, right away." So this is a common theme. It's like the 6 different episodes where he's experiencing stress at work. They start out by giving him these things like Ambien for insomnia. What I think I notice is that starts to make him more anxious, and a lot of times these psychiatrists or general practitioners seem to kind of blur the lines between anxiety, probably performance anxiety on his part, and depression. So then they think, oh, I'm seeing. So then they would prescribe like he was on Paxil, in the months before he was switched to Prozac before the killings, and Paxil, he gained like almost like 45 pounds, and I think I write about this, that he and Kim are going to the beach or something like that, and she's driving, and she looks over, and he's drooling. You know, he's having these terrible side effects of the Paxil, but she didn't know that. But anyway, what I think happened is these pills made it appear like he had depression, and then that's labeled you're being mentally ill. So all of this was medication induced, in my opinion, and exacerbated by the pills.
So is Kim saying, and are you saying, that it's possible or probable that he didn't have a true mental illness other than he was dealing with anxiety, which led to insomnia?
Right.
And
right.
I don't think that that's really would be considered a full-blown like mental illness.
Exactly.
It's just something that we all have to deal with in some way or other at different degrees.
Exactly.
But you get on the meds, and it's a snowball effect, and it worsens the situation.
Exactly.
So they give him more meds.
Exactly.
And before you know, he's drooling and gaining 45 pounds.
Exactly. That's right. You know, some books have been written about, there's this diagnostic manual that has been written by psychiatrists that started out kind of modest and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, they started to expand it to, you know, just if somebody says they have the blues, well, that's depression, you know? And so it's almost, that's an insidious thing. You should read some books about that, about how, I hate to say it, but it's kind of like a money-making thing. And a way to retain patients.
Yeah.
It's a dark side of it.
I don't know where to ask you this, but the placebo effect is kind of fascinating.
Yes, it is.
And, you know, I guess I'm asking, I guess it came to mind just now because, first of all, I've read other books on the placebo effect. It's kind of an amazing thing when I read a lot due to like neck and back pain. I read a lot about psychosomatic illness and how to resolve certain problems that might be psychosomatically induced as opposed to an actual problem in your back or neck.
Yes. I've dealt with back pain before. Stress can cause it.
Right. Well, and stress used to cause ulcers.
Yeah.
And where are all the ulcers? Where'd they go? And actually, there was a New York Times article a number of years ago where, like, if you recall, like your dad's generation, your granddad's generation, like these high-powered guys would like compare notes on how many bleeding ulcers they had.
It's true.
Where'd they go? When was the last time you were sitting around talking to a guy who says, "Man, I had this bleeding ulcer"?
It's so true.
And so there's this article. It's true, and so they have statistically disappeared. You remember carpal tunnel syndrome?
Yeah.
Everyone had it.
Yeah.
Everyone had it, and everyone had the braces, and it was, where'd it go?
Yeah.
When was the last time somebody told you that they have carpal tunnel syndrome?
Exactly.
So these things literally come and go throughout society, and the psychosomatic components of illness are a very, very real thing.
Yes.
And so now the way people, quote, carry their stress, it's been in neck and back pain. A lot of people have herniated discs. I got 2 herniated discs. A third of Americans have herniated discs.
Yes. But
there is this like process where we say, oh, you know, my back hurts, I'm carrying my stress. Yes, of course we have sedentary lifestyles, all this kind of things, but
posture.
But what happened to the ulcers? Where are they?
Yeah.
That's where they used to carry their stress. And so now they carry it neck and back pain. They go to the doctors, and the doctors before too long they have a scalpel in their hand. Like that's the solution.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Meds and scalpels. So when you look into this whole area of psychosomatic illness, there's been some very, very prominent doctors that used to cut people all day for a living, and they started saying, wait a minute. What if we were able to handle this almost just psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and you were to, with the neuroplasticity of the brain, what if we could rewrite the neuropathways to where there is something that induces concern. Let's say financial stress.
Yeah.
Okay. Every month you got to pay the bills, and you start recognizing that there's a pattern. I have stress with the bills. I have conflict with my spouse. I get weirded out. So then all of a sudden I'm feeling a whole lot more neck and back pain. I'm getting tense, all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
So the process for rewriting the neural pathways is that you can really start saying, okay, I see this coming on.
Yeah.
And I'm able, sometimes with literally pen and paper,
Yeah.
My back will not hurt. My back will not hurt. My back will not hurt. I mean, it's kind of like a kid in the old chalkboard, with the teacher saying, I will be a good boy. I will be a good boy. Actually, neurologically, what you're doing there, Ed, is you are rewriting neuro pathways in your mind to respond to certain stimulus, right?
Yeah.
And so they have found that if you can see the thing that's going to cause anxiety or stress in your life,
Yep.
and if you have habituated yourself to mentally respond a certain way,
Yes.
you might be able to reduce a whole lot
Yeah.
of the neurological reactions that are pain is in the brain.
Yes, it is.
I mean, literally, it's in the brain.
Yeah.
And
It's true.
My uncle, my godfather, he told me he worked at a neck and back it's a pain rehab facility, because they all get addicted to pain meds.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So these people that have chronic neck and back problems or whatever, they get addicted to pain meds, and that's a whole nother pandemic out there, right?
Totally.
So they get addicted to this. And so I asked him one time, I said, Uncle Pat, God rest his soul. I said, Uncle Pat, what do you do? Like, how do you help manage people's pain? You're an expert in this now. Like, how do you do it? And he did it because he went through the program and became a counselor. And he said this, as simple as this. He said, Conor, if I took a hammer right now and slammed your thumb, you would be in extreme pain, right? And I said, yeah, absolutely. He said, but then if I pulled a gun out and stuck it right in your face, you wouldn't think about your thumb anymore.
Yeah. That's
that
stark.
That is the power of the mind.
Yes,
like,
it is.
The mind will send signals to what you're supposed to be thinking and worried about, and be pain, where you're supposed to experience pain right now. So our world is telling us neck and back pain. Other countries do not have the same kind of problem. Yes, they're more mobile, but nonetheless, when you get into this area, and I read a lot of books on this and overcame quite a lot of neck and back pain, just realizing that it wasn't as physically as bad as I thought, and psychologically it was worse than I thought.
Yep.
So kind of approaching it from that standpoint, what you inevitably come up against is the placebo effect.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And placebo first got its start with a doctor in World War I who, in the tent, he had to amputate somebody's leg or something, or an arm or something. And he ran out of morphine. And so he told the nurse, he said, give me a syringe of saline water.
Yeah.
And he did. She handed it to him.
Yes.
And he injected saline water into this soldier, and he watched the soldier go, oh.
Wow. How about that?
And then he amputated without a problem, sewed the guy up. And
incredible.
And at that moment, this doctor said, okay, something's going on here. So after that, he dedicated his life to understanding what the hell just happened.
Exactly.
How was I able to trick this guy with morphine? Because the guy was begging for morphine, and so he gave him fake morphine.
Yes.
And it worked. So your brain is the greatest pharmaceutical agency on the planet. Your brain can produce a lot of what it needs.
It can.
So so when they are doing this, all right, sorry, that was a long tangent, but I kind of find it completely fascinating.
It's very germane to
and so these drug companies, whenever they're trying to get the trials done correctly, no matter what it is, a vaccine or anything else, they're supposed to run a placebo comparison.
Exactly.
And to see how effective the actual drug is or is not. How much of this is in their brain.
Exactly.
And so there's a whole section here about the pharmaceutical companies with these SSRIs and the placebo study, and it's mind-blowing to me.
It is.
And these things are not nearly as effective
That's right.
as they want to pretend that it is, and their placebo tests prove that.
That's exactly
Sorry,
right.
but I'm going to hand it over to you now. That was my rant for this one episode. I always do one rant per episode. That was my rant for this episode. So go ahead.
That's great. Yeah. That's a big factor in the book. And I cite the work of a gentleman named Dr. Irving Kirsch, Kirsch, who's now a lecturer at Harvard Medical School. And kind of early on, after these drugs started getting into the market and taking off and all that kind of stuff, he was interested in the placebo effect. He's a psychologist, I think, by trade. He was interested in the placebo effect with other forms of medicine. And so he thought at the time when he started doing his studies on these drugs, he thought that these drugs were wonder drugs, and he would send some of his patients to psychiatrists so that psychiatrist could prescribe an SSRI for his patient. So anyway, he decides to just, let's see if there's a placebo effect related to these drugs. And, he has done several studies, and over and over and over again, his studies have basically proven that SSRI antidepressants are basically no more effective at ameliorating the symptoms of depression than a sugar pill, ergo, a placebo. And he's written a book about it, The Emperor's New Drugs: Exploding the Antidepressant Myth. And so, I get into these trials too, and of course,
did the trials use placebo, or was it just after the fact? Okay.
Oh yeah,
okay.
they did. It was always against a placebo, right?
Okay. Yeah, it has to be. I think
it does
for FDA approval, right?
It does.
Okay.
So, and of course, these now people need to realize these clinical trials are not conducted by an outside company. They're bought and paid for by Eli Lilly. So they each have their own clinical trials, et cetera. So
self-regulating.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Exactly. And and Peter Bregan, who you mentioned earlier, has kind of studied that whole process. And he says what happens is, the patients are divided in half. Half of the group takes an SSRI antidepressant. The other half takes a placebo. And sort of perversely, what happens is the ones who take the SSRI start experiencing side effects, and they think that is the pill going to work. And so they think it's going to work, making them better, correcting the quote unquote chemical imbalance in their brain, which we need to get into all that. So they think that oh, this is good news. This is so I'm perceiving myself as making progress and all that sort of thing. But in the end, in study after study, and I hate to say it, but what happens is the clinicians are confronted with the data that show that these things that they're testing aren't that much better at all in ameliorating the symptoms of depression, but they end up manipulating the data. And so they come out and say, this proves that, this works, it's tolerated well, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a particularly egregious study that I'd like to, on this front, that I'd like to mention. It's called Study 329. It's an infamous clinical trial that was conducted among children and adolescents, okay? And so this was GlaxoSmithKline that bought and paid for this study. The most comprehensive clinical study ever conducted on the effects of an SSRI on adolescents. Thanks to a whistleblower, GlaxoSmithKline was caught red-handed in burying data which indicated that Paxil caused suicidality in an alarming percentage of adolescent patients. What GlaxoSmithKline did, they fudged the language. They said that it was emotional lability, lability, just kind of weeping or whatever, when they knew it was suicidality in like 20% of the adolescents that were being tested. So anyway, the whistleblower, a salesman, alerted the U.S. Department of Justice about all this. The U.S. Department of Justice charged GlaxoSmithKline with failing to report safety data, which is really fraudulent concealment of, and more. And in 2012, GlaxoSmithKline pleaded guilty and paid a $3 billion settlement, including a criminal fine of $1 billion. Now, you would think that would hurt their sales.
You would think. You'd also think it'd be on headlines.
Yeah. No. And so their sales actually went up that year. So, and you would think that would cause alarm bells to go off about prescribing this stuff to adolescents in particular, young people, adolescents. I mean, this is important for folks out there to know. Again, the UK psychiatric establishment was more skeptical about all this than the American establishment. But by 2004, the British government had virtually banned SSRIs for children and young adults in the light of real risk for suicide and violence. Here, the drug companies were kind of dragged kicking and screaming to even put a black box warning about suicidality among adolescents, et cetera. And so in the ensuing years, this is an alarming statistic. Between 2016 and 2022, the monthly dispensing rates of antidepressants in the United States increased by 66.3% for 12 to 25-year-olds. Among 12 to 17-year-old females, the dispensing rate increased by 130%.
Oh my gosh!
And I get into this toward the end of my book. My friend David Carmichael came and did an event with me in Charlotte, and he got into this issue, and it has to do with youth sports. What's happening in youth sports now, in both Canada and the U.S., is there are these sports psychologists that the kids are referred to. So, you have a son who struck out in the bottom of the bottom of the seventh inning or whatever,
right,
and feels like he let his team down, and you think he needs some kind of help. Well, don't lean on the coach to help him cope with that. In fact, in Canada, coaches are being said, don't even go there. Refer them to a sports psychiatrist or psychologist, and those people are still all too ready to prescribe this poison for these young people. So, I need to share this. I mean, this is just anecdotal, but there's a young man in my family. He will remain nameless. A 6'6", 260-pound young man, got a full ride at a major college for football, tight end. Grew up in Atlanta. Went to, just surrounded by upper middle class people. Went to some of the better schools there, and so he's 28 years old. And he recently told me that 13 of his friends or acquaintances have died by suicide, his contemporaries. And in almost every case, they were taking an antidepressant. I mean, it's beyond being a scandal. And you just don't hear about it. And why don't you hear about it? Because I mean, look at television commercials. The pharmaceutical industries own TV networks almost. They own members of Congress, some of them. So I mean, so in America, and of course, there have been so many cases that have been settled out of court, not made headlines, all that. So, don't get me started.
Tan Books is here to help you become a saint. That's why we do everything we do. We publish thousands of titles, literally, that are specifically written to help you get to heaven. Everything from the lives of the saints to the writings of the saints, the greatest doctors of the church, the great spiritual masters, Alphonsus Liguori, St. Francis de Sales, and so on. So please come to tanbooks.com and find the book that God wants you to have right now so that you can get to heaven and be a saint for eternity.
All right, Ed, we're back. We took a little bio break, and I got some fresh coffee. This has been amazing, but we kind of needed to reset and figure out, okay, where are we going from here? But I told a story offset to you and my team, and I was reluctant to tell the story because I don't want this to be about me, but my experience might be common, to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I'll just tell it. So a number of years ago, I don't know, 15 years ago, a lot of pressure. We acquired Tan Books out of bankruptcy. I had no idea how to run a business. We got a bunch of little kids. It's a stressful time in a young person's life. I'm far less stressed now, even though I have like more stuff going on. But when you're young, you don't have the support. You don't have the experience.
That's right.
You don't have the width of your shoulders to carry a heavy weight. You just
so true.
So I'm a young executive, being crushed under the weight of a bankrupt business. And anyway, so oddly enough, I get vertigo, and I'm walking down the hall one day. I'll start with it. I'm walking down the hall one day, and all of a sudden, boom, I just hit the wall on the right side. Just fly and hit the wall. Thought that was weird, didn't think much about it. A little while later, I'm sitting in my chair at my computer, and then I just feel like somebody just pushes me to the right side. A little while later, I'm driving my car. Exact same thing happens, and I literally just go off the road onto the right side into the grass, going full speed. And it's just by the grace of God, I didn't go left and hit a car. I just went right into the road, into the grass. I didn't pull. I just was pushed almost. And so eventually, my wife takes me to ear, nose, and throat doctor, and it's like I'm having vertigo. These little tiny bursts of vertigo. What is going on? Did 100 tests, couldn't find anything. Had a couple different appointments. And then he says, I want you to bring your wife back in for this next appointment. Okay. So she comes in and he says, now I wanted to ask you, Ashley, not Conor, because he probably won't answer me honestly. How does Conor sleep? And she says, oh, terrible. He's up wandering around, and if he wakes up for 10 seconds, we always have crying babies. We've had crying babies for 23 years. She's amazing. Like, she can get up, nurse a baby, change a diaper, and go back to sleep in like 5 seconds. And if I hear anything, I'm up, and then I got, cash flow problems going through my brain and personnel conflict in my brain, and I'm up.
Yeah.
And then I might as well just get up and go to work, even if it's 2 a.m, because I'm done. I can't go back to sleep. So that's what's going on. So the doctor says, I think you're clinically exhausted and don't have any idea that you are. Wow. Okay. He says, that's why you're getting vertigo. So I want you to take Ambien for 90 days straight to reset your clock. And I'm saying, well, okay. No, I didn't even know if I had known what Ambien was at the time.
Right.
But I said, okay, sure, I'll do that. And I did it. Well, one day shortly after that, maybe a couple weeks into the regimen or whatever, I'm working late at night at home at my dining room table, and I take a pill and I'm about to go to bed, but something comes up and I have to pull up Excel on my laptop, and I have to work on this Excel spreadsheet. Well, the Ambien's been in my system now for 30 minutes, 45 minutes? I don't know. But Ed, I'm not kidding. I watched a cell with the numbers in it in Excel come off the screen, go above the screen, and fly around, moving all around. And I watched them fly around, and eventually they came back and landed back on the screen.
Wow.
My first reaction was, this is awesome. I'm tripping And I didn't even do anything wrong. My second, as soon as my mature self kicked in, I said, this is terrible. I need to go to bed.
Yeah.
You know, I can't take Ambien and stay awake. I thought that was the problem.
Yeah.
So take Ambien, go to sleep. Don't stay awake. So a couple weeks later, I'm traveling for work. I'm still on the Ambien protocol. And I wake up in the morning and I find on my bedside table a receipt for dinner. And I look at it. I said, I didn't go to dinner last night. And I look at my signature and everything. And I look around the room. My keys are in a different spot, just like everything's changed. And I'm in clothes that I had not put on when I had gone to bed. I had gone downstairs, and apparently I had sat in the restaurant in the hotel, and I had ordered dinner, and I had paid my bill, and I had my receipt, and I did all of that. And Ed, I had absolutely no memory of doing it whatsoever. None. And that scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, forget the protocol.
Yeah.
I'm done with this Ambien crap.
Yeah.
I never took it again. I've since, I've taken melatonin at different times.
Yeah.
But or Benadryl, you know, but never a mind-altering drug like this.
Yeah.
So that was my tiny little window into how easily something just like Ambien could alter my brain. Now, if you were to put that in my system for months and months or years and years, and then throw in antidepressants into it and other things, this could have been me.
Yeah.
This could have been me.
That's exactly the way I felt when I went through that Superior Court hearing. Exactly. That this could have happened to me. And I think the stories around Ambien alone are legion. You know, a lot of traffic problems have been caused. They've since learned by people on Ambien. So, the stories are legion.
Yeah.
So,
and David Crespi was on Ambien and
trazodone.
What is trazodone? You mentioned that when we started a couple hours ago. What is trazodone?
I think it. Some people see it as like another way to address insomnia, and so he was on that Ambien. Had started the Prozac 7 days prior, and that's something that folks need to know is these SSRI antidepressants are most dangerous when right when people first start them. And I've already covered a couple of cases where that was the case. Also, like if you've been taking them for a while and the dosage is heightened, that can cause problems. And then withdrawing from these drugs can cause serious problems. And we need to say to folks out there, if you're on an antidepressant right now, don't let this what I've been saying scare you to death and make you want to suddenly withdraw from them, because that's very dangerous. If you do decide to do that, you need to seek really qualified medical help. There's a story in the book about a psychiatrist involved with a major study in London, and he had horrific experiences coming off just 10 milligrams of Lexapro. And I since heard him on a podcast, and he said that getting off the last milligram, he's like shaving these pills with a razor. But he said coming off the last milligram or two has been almost impossible. He's been doing it for over a year. That's a big thing for people to know about, the potential withdrawal effects, and just be very careful. And people may ask, how could it be the case that I'm feeling like these things are working for me, and what I would say is, if you feel that way, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. First, do no harm. Stick with what you think is working. But what I've learned through my research is that the reason some people are able to tolerate these drugs better than others, it boils down to, believe it or not, liver enzymes. The enzymes in your liver, do they have the ability to break down these chemicals effectively? And I got this off of a documentary that I watched. And so in a case like David Crespi, David Carmichael, clearly their DNA didn't encode liver enzymes that were able to break these things down. And when that happens, the people that can't break down the chemicals, it's almost like the side effects of the drugs are amplified by 2 or 3 or 4 times. It's almost like if you've taken
it's almost like you're overdosing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because your body's not breaking it down.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
So yeah.
One of your last chapters in the book, SSRIs, rest in peace, ?
Yeah.
And so, in light of that, what else about the studies, what else about your research, what else do you want to say about the current mindset, or where are we as a culture in regards to this? I mean, I think one place you said one in 5 Americans is on an antidepressant.
That's right.
What?
20% of Americans now on antidepressants. That's right.
How can that be? How can that be?
Yeah, I know. They're just.
It must just be general practitioners, because there's not that many psychiatrists.
That's a key point. I was with a lawyer at that event in Charlotte with David Carmichael, and he said that the stats are that 2/3 of these antidepressants are prescribed by general practitioners, your personal physician, and only 1/3 by a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And the problem is, so many of those doctors have not been properly sort of educated about some of these, the side effects. I was. This is interesting. I was on a live radio show on Sirius FM.
XM.
Yeah, exactly. It was a doctor, a NYU trained young doctor was the host, and so I got through everything fine. Toward the end, running out of time, and I thought I needed to share this, and I said, what people out there need to know is that depression, all the scientific evidence is now that depression is not caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Yeah.
That is a myth that was concocted by the drug companies. And that's what, and I also said, mountains of evidence suggest that SSRI antidepressants are no more effective at ameliorating the symptoms of depression than a sugar pill. Well, my publicist got an email from the producer and said he was going along just fine until he said that depression is not caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. Where did he get that from? And I told my publicist, I wish I had said, just Google 3 words, depression, chemical imbalance, and you wouldn't believe how many articles come up debunking that.
Yeah.
It's much more complex. So
it's on page 206 and 207 in your book. One of my questions for you was, is depression really a serotonin imbalance or not?
Yeah, exactly.
And this looked like a bombshell revelation to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And as somebody who has dealt with depression and kind of worked through that yourself,
right?
So you can get into that if you'd like. But
yeah.
what the hell is depression if it's not this? Because that's what we've all been told.
Right.
And in the pharmaceutical, look, I'm not a doctor, but the pharmaceutical company who's making billions off of this,
that's right,
with 20% of Americans, they're not going to volunteer the answer.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And it's important to note, I cite a 2022 study in the UK where they surveyed consumers in the UK, and I think it's been done here in the US too. And 80% of the typical consumers think they know that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's been, and it's because the pharmaceutical companies spent billions promoting that theory. So
because if it is a chemical imbalance,
right,
they can give you a pill that has that chemical.
That's right. Exactly.
That's why.
Exactly.
If you're out of gas, we can give you more gas.
That's right.
It's just that simple.
Right. Right.
And you also don't have to do the other things to overcome the problem.
Right. That's right.
It's a
quick fix.
It's a quick fix.
That's right.
The happy pill.
Yeah, in my chapter called "A History of Antidepressants," the first part of it is how well received all of these SSRI antidepressants were. How they, there's all these articles about what miracles they were all working, et cetera, and then it kind of like the high water mark of all of that enthusiasm for this. In an article, I discovered that two people kind of just went over the top about what this proved about the human brain. And one of them was David Satcher, the U.S. Surgeon General at the time, who declared in 1999, quote, "The bases of mental illness are chemical changes in the brain. There's no longer any justification for the distinction between mind and body or mental and physical illnesses. Mental illnesses are physical illnesses." Nobel laureate Francis Crick put it more directly, quote, "You," unquote, "your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. As Lewis Carroll's Alice might have phrased it, you're nothing but a pack of neurons." So what that is, it's incredible hubris, it's scientism, and it also is basically the philosophy, if it can be called that, of materialism. So what is the definition of materialism? This is from the American Psychiatric Association Dictionary of Psychology. Materialism is the philosophical position that everything, including mental events, is composed of physical matter and is thus subject to the laws of physics. From this perspective, the mind is considered to exist solely as a set of brain processes. Encyclopedia Britannica defines materialism as such. The theory denies that immaterial or apparently immaterial things, such as minds, exist, or else explains them away as being material things or motions of material things.
So here we had the Surgeon General in 1999.
Yeah.
Who was president in 99? That would have been, was it Bush or Clinton?
Clinton, maybe.
It was probably the end of Clinton, I think.
Yeah.
But you have the Surgeon General saying that you're nothing but a clump of neurons.
That's right. That's right. And I think that is a prevailing phenomenon in psychiatry. I think what a lot of these psychiatrists adhere to is something that could be called Freudian materialism. And I have a proposed afterword that I hope I can work into the second edition of this book. And it talks about Freudian materialism. And my modest proposal is to end biological psychiatry by 2040. And and so it starts. If I were king of the world, and we should all thank our lucky stars that I am not, I would issue this urgent communique. I hereby decree that biological psychiatry, which is basically based on materialism, has proven itself to be morally, spiritually, and scientifically bankrupt, that psychiatrists, physicians, and more important, patients must reject biological psychiatry and all its empty promises, and that the practice of biopsychiatry must therefore end by no later than the year 2040. Why? Because the foundation upon which biological psychiatry is built is a reductive and soulless concept of the human person, naming Freudian materialism. What exactly is Freudian materialism? Perhaps the following dialogue between C.S. Lewis and his good friend Owen Barfield in approximately the year 1919 will shed some light. Lewis, who by this time had been an avowed atheist for many years, had recently returned to Oxford after having been wounded twice in World War I. In those days, Freudian materialism was all the rage at Oxford. It still is.
It is.
You look at Richard Dawkins, he's a clear materialist. And Lewis had become swept up in this novel philosophy or belief system, as had Barfield. But then one day, Barfield made an unexpected announcement. Barfield told Lewis that he had changed his views. He was no longer a materialist. He now considered himself a theist. Lewis was stunned, flummoxed, gobsmacked. Barfield came from a free-thinking family. During Barfield's upbringing, he had barely heard of Christianity. How could he now be a theist? So Lewis says this to Barfield: God, spirit, the afterlife? Damn it, Owen, it's all medieval. You may say that, Jack, but the medieval world has much to teach us, Barfield replied. You mean that the world is flat? Lewis countered sardonically. Barfield then asked Lewis if he believed that logic and reason could lead to objective truth. Lewis said, yes, he did. Are your moral and aesthetic judgments moral and reasonable? Barfield asked. Lewis again replied in the affirmative. Quote, well, then materialism must be abandoned, Barfield asserted. There is a hopeless discord between what our minds claim to be and what they really must be if materialism is true. We claim our minds to be reason-perceiving, able to grasp universal principles, and possessing free will. But if materialism is true, our minds must in reality be merely chance arrangements of atoms in our skulls.
And how would there ever be merit? How could you ever thank your spouse for loving you? How could you ever get any credit for anything that you do? You're a biological accident.
Exactly. And how on what basis could you say that Nazism was wrong? You
can't, because Hitler's just a byproduct of the universe. Resulting in this neurological accident that causes him to do all of these things.
Exactly.
And you made the beautiful analogy of like Handel's Messiah. Explain that one.
Yeah, that's right. I said to a group of people, I said, okay, so, according to this theory, your mind is just molecules colliding in your brain. So how do you explain Handel's Messiah? That just on that particular day or days when he was composing that, the molecules in his brain were just, really colliding extra well.
Yeah.
Michelangelo's inspired sculptures, the Sistine Chapel, those were caused by just randomly colliding molecules. But
it gets rid of good and evil.
Yeah, that's right. And this is still prevalent. Like I say, Richard Dawkins and, the Harris and I'm sure Christopher Hitchens probably was a materialist, and they think it's sophisticated, but just deep down, it's just stupid,
Yeah. And they say that there's really no such thing as a real atheist. They try to be, but they can't really do it.
That's right. And
is there really a real materialist out there? I mean, doesn't the soul within their bodies just know that this is wrong?
Yeah.
Scripture says the natural law is written on their heart.
Yeah, exactly.
And they know it because they can't just, how can they look? Does Richard Dawkins have a child? And can he look at that child and be proud of him? Like if it's just a computer program playing out, you can't really be proud of your child when it does something good. You can't do that.
Exactly.
And you can't be mad when your child does something wrong. He has to have the logic to know it, but they just lie to themselves and they lie out loud because they're terrified of confronting the divine.
That's right. And you think back, and for centuries, the conception of the human person was kind of a tri-leveled one: mind, a body, and a soul. And it's in Genesis that man and woman were made in God's image. In His image and likeness, He made them. Right.
Yes.
So there's an inherent dignity, and then of course, when Christ comes, He gives us an even so much of a greater dignity, because I think Saint Irenaeus said, God became man so that man may become God.
Yes.
He meant God-like, of course.
God-like, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, how do you have any, and of course,
Athanasius, I think, was the one who's Saint Athanasius, and maybe Irenaeus, maybe he said it first.
Yeah.
But how do you connect this materialism, to the discussion at hand of the pharmaceuticals' understanding of depression,
right?
And whether it's truly and simply only serotonin in the brain malfunctioning.
That's right.
Tie all that together.
Yeah, it's you can see where they would fall for that theory, because if you have the preconception that the brain is just made up of neurons, neurotransmitters like serotonin, that you would fall for it. That it's not. There's nothing spiritual that's happening. So therefore, it just has to be this chemical imbalance, and all you got to do is correct it, and then everything's just hunky dory.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do intelligent people fall for that? I think greed had a lot to do with it. And also just I don't know, bad education. Probably a lot of professors are materialists.
Yeah.
So
where do you want to go? Where do you want to go?
You asked a good question. So
what is depression? What does depression
cause it? Right.
Yeah.
And so I've got a little box in
page 209.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just quickly read some of that. Depression results from a complex interaction of social, psychological, and biological factors. It can be linked with childhood experiences, stressful life events, personality traits, family history, recreational drug and alcohol use, physical health problems, and genetics. People with existing mental health conditions such as an eating disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, of course, may also be more likely to experience depression. I'm sure you follow this whole CTE phenomenon in football and all that. Yeah. As depression is often associated with a, quote, negative bias in the way a person looks at the world and processes information, non-pharmacological interventions such as cognitive behavioral therapy can work by challenging automatic negative thoughts, et cetera. So
one word,
yeah.
If I was your editor,
Yeah.
I would have asked you to add one word.
Yeah.
Depression results from a complex interaction of social, psychological, biological, and spiritual.
Well, I would have.
Spiritual was missing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm quoting from.
Okay, sorry. That part's not yours. You're quoting.
That's right.
Oh, it is. It's in a longer quote. Got it.
Yeah.
That's
in
a longer quote. But the spiritual side is missing. I mean, we live in an agnostic type world, and all of the moral problems that have plaguing our society have got to be causing psychological problems. So
absolutely. And I'm glad you said spiritual, because I now want to just talk about how I was able to get through my episodes of depression, because it involves the spiritual. So I'm just going to talk about the first one. Happened in college. My first major episode happened in college, sophomore year, right before Christmas. I couldn't get out of bed. I was sleeping like 18 hours a day. Couldn't get out of bed. Didn't know what that was, but knew I was wasting my granddad's trust money. He's the one that was paying for my college, and I just had to find a way to get myself together. So I just unilaterally withdrew from college and decided to go back home and just do manual labor or something. I was an athlete, and for some reason, I had this intuitive sense that exercise might help.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be like 1974, 75, 76, right in there. And so I just started running more, and like Rocky came out, so I decided, all these push-ups, and I started to feel better. And of course, I didn't know about this phenomenon called endorphins, but anyway, that eventually tamped everything down. Now, the second episode I want to talk about came after I was married. We got married at age 24. I immediately went into the highly competitive advertising agency world, where I was a copywriter in my misspent youth. Pretty highly charged, pressure-packed kind of thing, and we bought our first house, and we had $37 left in our savings, and I was driving my boss's wife's BMW to the closing. And on the way back from the closing, I went through a school zone going 37 miles an hour. Cop pulls me, and the fine was $37. So we were down to zero.
Oh man!
So anyway, I started to experience a terrible. It hurt even physically, just a terrible bout with depression. And so my mentor in advertising at the time knew a Methodist minister. And then at this point in my life, I was kind of a heathen. I really didn't go to church. My wife has always been a faithful Catholic. And so she used to drag me to Mass. And I remember, do you remember the prayer? One of the prayers used to say, "And protect us from all anxiety as we wait in joyful hope."
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
That used to wash over me. So my mentor connected me with this Methodist minister. And, the first session with him, he says, "Hey, Ed, I hear you've won some awards in advertising, And I kind of brightened up. Yeah, I won some awards. And feel pretty good about that. I won some awards." And he said, "I don't care. I don't care that you've won some awards in advertising. Okay, your time is up." Kind of like that. That was that's a little jarring. Then our last get together, he got to the bottom of it all, and he said, "Ed, here's the source of all this. You have never been loved unconditionally." That's and so he was between the lines trying to point me toward there is a source of unconditional love you could tap into, And then it occurred to me, my wife loved me unconditionally. We didn't have children at the time. And so in the midst of all this too, I'm glad I can talk to your audience about this. I haven't been able to talk to other audiences about this, but I experienced what could be called a theophany. So it was February, probably late February, cold, just the coldest month. And it was this incredibly dark night, literally, no moonlight outside. And I'm 31 years old, and I'm just in agony. And the room was totally dark. And I just kind of, it literally drove me to my knees. I got down on my knees. My wife was luckily sleeping, and I've got my arms on the bed, and I said, "God, if you exist, am I ever gonna be well again? Am I ever gonna get out of this?" And I happened to be looking up into the corner of the room, total darkness, And at that exact moment, I kid you not, this little green light comes on. Ding, ding. Green light comes on. It was a lightning bug in February that does that at that exact moment. What are the probabilities that any lightning bug would be alive in February?
In February, I was like, yeah, they're
so it's not like I'm, woo, I'm better. It wasn't like that. It took a long time, to get through it. But all of that
was hope.
All of that helped, and then, then I converted to Catholicism, and then, I never heard about concepts like redemptive suffering when I was a Protestant. Never heard about things like that, and so, Catholicism. Pope John Paul II wrote about the suffering, the uses of suffering. I read that, and all of that's very helpful too. And Kim Crespi is a living example of redemptive suffering. I was telling somebody, I heard this wonderful sermon that Father Mike Schmitz gave, and part of it was about, why do horrific things happen to good people, And he was talking about, correct me if I don't have this exactly right, but he was saying, the short answer, there is no short answer, is what he first said. Then he said, God has two different kinds of will for us. The first is God's perfect will. God's perfect will is that, you will experience a life of abundance and health, and everything will go beautifully, and you'll grow in your friendship with Christ and join him in heaven. That's the perfect will. But then there's the permissive will, where because he gives us, all of us, free will, he permits people to misuse their free will, and that washes into people's lives sometimes in terrible tragedies. And so, so why does he permit something like that to happen? It's because somehow, some way, a greater good can come out of it, right? And if you have any doubt about that something good can come out of something horrific, go look at a crucifix. Stare at that for a while. There's your proof. And so so Kim Crespi grasps that. And so that's the hope of this book, is that, that something good will come out of the horrific tragedy that's happened to her, to David Carmichael, all these people, and that it will, point people to more effective forms of health, mental health care, and save lives. That's really the kind of the real bottom line purpose of it.
What's going on with Kim and the kids today?
Well, I tell you, I did a book signing in Charlotte at Park Road Books not long ago, and she came to that. Now she's got
her suffering continues.
It does indeed. Yes.
She has Parkinson's, right?
And it's advanced Parkinson's at this point.
As if she needed anything else.
Exactly. Her brother-in-law said, you are a real life Job.
Yeah.
But she, no complaint, never. But she can't. She obviously can't drive. She can't. She has to have people like. She has no control over her neck anymore. So when you go to talk to her, she has to have a healthcare worker pick her head up to be able to. But she has been so lifted up by like that event, and that people are buying the book and talking about it, and I've shared this pretty long time ago, she created a website called CrespiFamilyHope.org. So anybody here listening to this, if you want to express support for the Crespi family emotionally, financially, or whatever, that's a good place to go. And the thing that's going on now is that she needs 24/7 care and she can't afford it. And
I asked Kevin just now by a nod to pull it up, so we're going to take a look at it.
Okay.
But keep going. So on that website, what can people do? Here we are.
Great.
I have not seen this, so you want to talk us through it a little bit, but
yeah. So there's down at the bottom, you can go donate with Give, Send, Go, or you can donate through the Crespi Healthcare Trust, and our friend Bob Wortel is
he in charge of that? Is he like the trustee of that?
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah. And there's more there about the journey, et cetera. Yeah. So she's very much lifted up by that.
There's a number of Kevin, experts and publications.
Yeah.
Look at many of the names we've mentioned: Peter Bregan,
that's right.
David Healy.
Yes.
These are the experts.
That's right. Joseph Glenmullen. He figures pretty heavily in the book. Yes.
Now, did you help create this? I mean, or
who helped create it? David Carmichael.
Really?
Yeah. He got a friend of his who's a really good designer to. It was not in very good shape, and so he paid out, and he's not exactly a wealthy guy. I mean, he's really bankrupt.
Kevin, what about us? Is there stuff about the family in there? Not really. It's not like stuff about the wife and kids.
Yeah. Our journey
doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's a place where people can go. Oh, here we are. That's okay. I was hoping to show some pictures here. So that is David with his little girls right there.
That's right. That's an incredibly haunting photograph.
And that must have been very shortly before
the
murder.
Totally. Yeah.
All right. So then that's him and Kim.
And they're the surviving children there at the bottom left.
This would have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
It's probably 10.
Yeah.
So those three
amazing
young adults now are remarkable.
Thank you, Kev.
Yeah. They're doing well considering. I think and David Carmichael speaks about this. When you're in a family like this, it's easy to be re-traumatized every time this story's told. So I think they're very appreciative of what's going on, but they're just trying to live their lives and not be reminded ever. And of course, I'm sure they're flashed to it probably every day. Maybe they've trained themselves not to on certain days, but
I heard Jessica and her husband Ryan Barrett started a podcast.
That's right.
Did they talk about this stuff? Or, I have no idea what the subject is.
Me neither. I doubt it. Okay. I doubt it.
Something else. I'm glad they're just living life.
Exactly. But they are remarkable young folks who are going about their lives and doing well.
David, you say at the end of the book,
that
David's in a dark spot right now.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, he. So as I said, I think in the last 6 months, he's been in 3 different prisons.
Goodness. And does that you have to start friendships all over again?
Speaking of that, so yeah, and Bob Wortel is the one who told me about this. So he was at Albemarle prison for a number of years and was doing well there. He was a assistant to the chaplain. He helped multiple inmates get their GEDs. Coached them.
I think he was running an RCIA program.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing.
And he had a bunkmate who he grew close to who converted to Catholicism, and before he was before he was moved from Albemarle prison, they broke that friendship up, in their infinite compassion, sarcastically said.
Yeah.
And also what happened was, because the prisons are so overcrowded, they started moving kind of more younger, more dangerous prisoners into his unit. So he got into a dark place, and he's still kind of in it, where he stopped calling Kim, and also didn't want to see visitors. And this is a man too who over the years had developed a mailing list of 400 people, pen pals with 400 different people, one of whom was General Petraeus, of all people, who wrote him back.
Wow.
And as you said,
we get letters from him. I haven't had one in a while.
Yeah. So he's in a dark place. Who knows what's going on in his head? But I talked to David Carmichael about this, and it's, we were just theorizing. It's kind of like he feels so bad about what's happened to Kim, and her financial situation is getting more and more dire because of the care that she needs. She's like 63, 64 years old. So she doesn't qualify for Medicare. She kind of has held on to a house, so she can't qualify for Medicaid help. So all of this is like private 24/7 care, which is enormously expensive.
And how are they paying for it? Just friends and family?
Bob has developed some donors that have helped, but I think she's just depleting whatever inheritance was left to her, and so I have pledged 80% of whatever royalties I receive from this book, 80% to her healthcare trust.
Good for you.
Yeah, and I hope, and so in effect, like if you're listening to this and you decide to buy the book, you're helping Kim, in a way. So thanks for asking, but yeah, it's a remarkable, and we gotta get to David, and I hope to visit with him. He's in the Mountain View prison in Spruce Pine now, and I'm hoping that I can get in to visit him.
Yeah. I don't know how to close it. I didn't know how to open this, and I don't know how to close it.
Yeah.
But you've done an amazing thing. Your book is not just passion. I mean, passion without brains is just dangerous. But this has passion, and it has serious brains. I mean, you have done your research, Ed. Everyone in this community who remembers this event and has watched Kim suffer so valiantly all these decades now, 2 decades, is grateful for what you've done. And the countless other people who I believe are going to be helped, who've never heard of David Crespi or maybe never do hear the name David Crespi, learn a little bit about the pharmaceutical industry, SSRIs, and at the very least, if your work can just make people pause and think about the medications that they're swallowing, and just think about it and be very intentional, be very informed.
Yes, that's a big issue.
And to talk about it thoroughly with their medical professionals, this might help a lot of people. It might save innocent victims from tragedy. I admire you. You're clearly a man of passion who cares about this. I just don't know what else somebody could expect from an author. So just congratulations, and thank you so much for what you've done.
Thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
I think we're done, but I think this new friendship between you and I are going to continue on for a long, long time.
I hope so.
Thanks for being here, Ed.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.